You're tuned in to Watch This with Eryk and Brandon, the show where we make a friend watch a movie or TV show they haven't seen before. Will they like it? Will their opinion be the same as yours? That is what we find out. And on today's episode, we are going to be discussing Downton Abbey. This is part 2 of our discussion on Downton Abbey. In our last episode, we watched episode 1 and gave our thoughts on that. Brandon had never seen it before, so it was, fresh, something new. And now we've watched the rest of season 1. Has his opinions changed on it? What are his opinions at the end of the season? Will he keep watching? This is what we're going to look at on today's episode. And
spoiler alert right now, we will be talking about the first season of Downton Abbey. So if you have not seen it, then you might want to go and watch it. You don't want any spoilers. We suggest that you watch it, then come back here. We'll break it all down for you. Last time we did watch this, we did talk about episode 1. Now we're ready to discuss the rest of the series this season. So starting with episode 2, and we're going to go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of huge plot points that that happen throughout the season. So we're going to try to get to all of the important ones as far as we're concerned. So starting with episode 2, at the end of episode 1, actually, we kind of see Matthew Crawley for the first time. Mm-hmm. And in episode 2, we sort of are officially introduced to him. And we get to see him experience Downton Abbey for the first time, meet the family, and he's super uncomfortable.
And it's nothing but awkward. The whole thing is just like he doesn't want to be waited upon. He pours his own drinks and stuff like that. So I mean, yeah, it doesn't look good for him to begin with.
Exactly. He's totally unimpressed with the whole thing. He has a butler at the house that he's living in. It just doesn't get him to do anything or whatever. And so he seems to be very uncomfortable with the whole thing.
And it's funny when the butler he seems uncomfortable even when he's he doesn't know what to do because Matthew's doing all this stuff for himself and the butler's just kind of sitting around like this, like what's going on?
He's standing there watching a man dress himself. If he was helping him dress himself, it would be his job. But watching him dress himself, it's an awkward thing. So yeah, he kind of makes it awkward for everybody. But you can tell that this guy probably is not interested in the whole thing. Yeah. But he's here. He's willing to take a look. He and his mother Isabel have showed up to this town, and they're talking about, well, maybe Lady Mary can marry Matthew, and he doesn't seem to be too interested in that either.
No, he doesn't really want to do it, and the whole idea is the family wanting to figure out how to break the entail, because there's 2 different pots of money, basically. There? Yeah.
Well, no. What it is like when the Earl of Grantham married Cora. She had a big fortune in her family, and when they got married, they sort of combined everything. And it's like a contract. And so what they're talking about is we want to break that contract, give all the money to Lady Mary, who would not be entitled to it anyway because she's a woman, right? Mm-hmm. This is the thing about 1912 is it's so different from today. So she, being a woman, cannot be an heir to the earldom. And so she's not entitled to any of the money, to Downton Abbey, all this stuff. So they want to just break that contract that's in there.
And that's a big problem.
Which is, and it's a difficult thing, which we'll get into in a little bit. But so the best solution is to find a male heir so that Downton Abbey can live on through somebody in the family. But nobody in the family is too thrilled about that because Matthew is basically a stranger.
Yeah, and he doesn't really come across as somebody that wants to do it. But then he sees Lady Mary and he's like, okay, well, maybe.
Starting to warm up.
Yeah. So there's that. And then Matthew's mother, who plays a role as a nurse, and she saves a patient. Right. He's got fluid building in his heart, and that kind of upsets everybody too because she's giving this doctor orders on what to do, and he doesn't like that. Again, back to 1912.
They're in this new town, right? Yeah. And she's trying to, make herself useful, and she thinks, well, I was a nurse, so why don't I go to the local hospital? And she kind of upends everything. She wants to do all these modern treatments, and that this little town is
has
just
never seen before,
not ready for. And
go ahead.
Oh, and she ends up saving somebody's life. Like you said, she convinces the doctor to do this procedure, which everybody is totally against. Mm-hmm. But then she kind of says, look, this guy is going to die anyway, right? If we don't give him treatment.
Him a chance, right?
And so why don't we try? And it ends up working and everything. And so she kind of, forces her way in, right? Kicks down the door and kind of gets herself in there and plays a bigger part, which is interesting because she has kind of a rivalry with the Dowager Countess.
And she's not happy with the whole situation either.
No, she is not. And the Dowager Countess was actually on the board, of the hospital in that town, and so she was not thrilled that Isabel wanted to force her way in. But it ends up working out in the end, and that's kind of interesting. There's a lot happening in that episode, and. But then again, it gets pretty crazy as the season goes on.
It goes on. So that's pretty much episode 2 in a nutshell. So episode 3, we see Evelyn Napier arrives, and he seems to be the new candidate for Lady Mary's new husband. But then there's a third guy, Mr. Pamuk, the Turkish aristocrat, I don't know, whatever you want to call him.
Something fancy.
And he's, like I said, he's another potential candidate, and she really likes him.
Right. So, that's right. Everybody's talking about, Evelyn Napier is going to be coming by. And
she's got no interest in Evelyn.
She does not seem to. And then, when Mr. Pamuk rides in on his horse, she is kind of dumbfounded.
She's stunned,
Yeah, that's right. And, something crazy happens with Mary and Mr. Pamuk.
Yeah.
Would you like to explain that, please?
Well, let's start with Thomas first, because they all spend the day hunting and everything, and then they all go in and gather at the house, and everybody's cleaning up or whatever. So Thomas, we've established, is gay,
right?
And he makes a move on Mr. Pamuk in the bedroom.
Yeah.
And Pamuk is like, what the hell's going on here? He's not happy. And Thomas is worried. Now what's going to happen? Is he going to tell everybody? Because people kind of have an idea that Thomas is gay, but
people who work with him.
But not like that. I don't think any of the Crowleys know.
Yeah.
So he's asking Mr. Pamuk what he can do for his silence and how he's going to stay quiet. And Pamuk says he wants the geography of the house.
He needs somebody who knows the geography of the house.
Wants to know where Lady Mary's room is.
That's right.
Yes.
Can you imagine having a house so big that you need somebody to
tell you
guide
where.
You through, like you need a map, basically.
That just shows you how big the castle
it's
is.
Huge. Yeah. So he does go and visit Lady Mary, and they have a night together, shall we say? And what happens, Brandon?
He dies.
He dies
mid whatever.
Right.
And so Mary's freaking out. What does she do? So she goes to her mother. She has nowhere else to go, really.
That's right.
Like, she's not going to go to her dad.
No, she will not go to her dad.
She goes to her mom, and Anna, who is another, we'll talk about her a little bit later on as well. And they end up dragging this body through the house back to his room to ensure that nobody knows what the heck happened.
Right.
And they wanted to just say, he died in his sleep in his room, because it would be scandalous to have Lady Mary having sex before she's married.
That.
Yeah, that
the
alone.
fact that he also died.
Yeah,
during
in her room.
Yeah. That makes for good gossip, shall we say? And that comes up again a little bit later. One other thing we see in episode 3, which we'll kind of touch on a little bit later, is Gwen, one of the maids in the house, develops a friendship with Lady Sybil, one of the daughters of the Crawley family, and because Gwen doesn't want to be in service anymore, she wants to be a secretary.
She wants to work as an empowered woman, I guess.
Exactly, right. Yeah. Because so many people at this time in England would have been working in service. I think it was like 70% of the population, which is crazy.
That's a lot, yeah.
A lot of people were working in service. She didn't want to do it anymore. She wanted to work in an office, a more modern job at the time. And so she started to get the ball rolling on that. And is it O'Brien who kind of rats her out and finds her typewriter?
Yeah, she's got the typewriter and basically. But at the end of the day, no one really... I mean, they're disappointed, but no one's upset or mad at her. They're like, okay, well, this girl wants to go and do her own thing, and that just shows what kind of person O'Brien is. She wants to get them in trouble,
of course,
and she's just a horrible person. And you see Thomas and O'Brien talking about how Mr. Pamuk did, in fact, go into Mary's room because Thomas told him where it was, and O'Brien says that the secret is safe for now, and that basically ends the episode.
We'll be getting into Thomas and O'Brien. They are...
they're nasty people.
They're nasty people. So, episode 4. At the beginning, we are introduced to a new character. His name is Branson, Tom Branson. He is the chauffeur at Downton Abbey, the new chauffeur. And I didn't realize, because, I've seen all 6 seasons of this show. I didn't remember him being introduced this early.
Yeah.
But
and you said he does play a major role, but...
He plays a huge role.
I don't know
forward.
about this because...
I won't say anything, of course. But he plays a huge, huge role going forward. So we are introduced to him. And... he sees Lady Sybil for the first time, and he
kind of likes her. Who could blame him, right?
Who could blame him? So then the Countess wants to speak to Matthew. You were mentioning about the entail earlier, because the women in the family want Mary to be able to get the fortune that really is entitled to her. She is the firstborn daughter. She really should get all the money, but because of the laws, because she's not a man, she can't get it. So. The Dowager Countess is like, well, you know what? Matthew is a lawyer. And he doesn't seem to want to be a part of this anyway.
So why not bring him in and see what we can do?
Exactly. If anybody could figure out what is possible in this situation, it would be Matthew, because he is a lawyer. And then we get the discovery that, Matthew says there's so many hoops to jump through.
There's too much to go through.
Yeah.
So
that disappoints everybody.
Yeah.
And Matthew, all of a sudden, is starting to feel like, maybe this could be something.
Yeah. And I mean, how could you turn down all that money and that life, right? That's the hard thing. I mean, he's not used to coming from that. Right. But at the same time, it's like if somebody's just going to hand over a whole ton of money and be like, here you go. Don't worry, you're not going to turn that down.
Right. But then again, and it does sound appealing, but then again, he is a lawyer and he is doing stuff that, he's helping other people, and he's a part of the middle class they mentioned at one point, and he seems to be comfortable there. And so, but then again, he starts to warm up to the idea in this episode, because he does find out that, it is going to be a whole big, to do.
The whole production,
if we try to go through with this. So that's kind of what's covered in episode 4. Actually, kind of a light episode there.
Yeah, and so episode 5, we start to see Daisy. One thing we forgot to mention, it was when they were dragging Pamuk's body through the house. Daisy did in fact see them. She didn't exactly see what was going on. Like, it was kind of dark.
She kind of saw it at the last moment.
Yeah, she saw them as they were walking into the room with this dead body. So now in episode 5, Daisy's starting to feel the effects of seeing Mr. Pamuk's dead body being dragged through the house, and the servants are beginning to ask questions too. They're in Mary's room fixing up the room. And Daisy's all uncomfortable. She's like, I don't want to be here. She's got the feeling of death, and everyone's like, what's going on? And they're starting to play mind games with Daisy, almost. Thomas and O'Brien, anyways. Those are the two. Like, as I said, they're pretty big jerks, and they ask her why she's feeling death in Mary's room and all this stuff, and it's not a good situation for Daisy, and you kind of feel bad for her. She doesn't want to say anything.
Yeah, she's not terribly bright, that Daisy, and she's very young.
Yeah,
and so when she
naive,
and so she's struggling with what she saw and everything, and they are able to coax it right out of her.
Yeah, so she ends up basically telling them
more or less. Yeah. And O'Brien, being the person that she is, goes to Edith and mentions
the second sister,
the second sister, and mentions to her what she might have heard, which leads Edith to grab the pen.
Yeah, and she writes a letter to the Turkish ambassador to tell them just what happened, and just all kinds of bad stuff going on. Like, there's just twists and turns.
A lot of talking behind people's backs.
Like there's it's sneaky,
very sneaky.
Yeah.
Episode 6, we jump forward a couple of years. Actually, we go from April of 1912, I believe, to May of 1914, and there's gossip about Lady Mary.
And the handsome Turk.
Because Lady Edith wrote this letter. Now, nobody knows at this point that it was Lady Edith who kind of spread the word, but there's a rumor in London that perhaps Mary is not virtuous. And so who spread this letter? How did this get out? That's what they're all trying to figure out. Even Carson ends up finding out about it in a letter.
Yeah.
And the Dowager Countess ends up finding out about it. Her grandmother.
So the walls are starting to cave in, right?
I should point out her very conservative grandmother.
Who's a great character, by the way. I remember how you said that. You liked her as a character, and she's funny.
She is absolutely hilarious.
Some of the lines that she comes out with, and just her mannerisms and everything is pretty funny.
Oh, hilarious.
Lady Sybil starting to show some interest in politics now, and she's for women's rights. It's 1914 now, and I guess they still can't vote.
Right. It's kind of the sort of in the middle of the suffragette sort of movement. I don't know if that's what they called it in Britain, but over here in North America, that's kind of what it was. And and it was all about getting women the right to vote, because they certainly should have had it, but it took a long time. And so that's what she's really fighting for. And could it be that the news chauffeur Tom Branson has anything to do with Sybil's sudden interest in politics?
It could be, because he drives her down to the by-election count, and it's a whole chaotic scene down there,
right?
She's this woman,
who's not
petite,
used to that,
kind of like scared.
Yeah.
I'm
dressed
scared,
up in fancy
but
clothes.
She's all dressed nice, and then the big brawl kind of breaks out. She gets knocked over, smacks her head, and it's just a whole scene.
After being told by her dad very loudly that he doesn't want her down there anymore, manages to convince him to go again, and then you said, a brawl breaks out, a riot basically breaks out at this political rally or whatever it is, or at that point was that already the results of the election where that happens?
It was the result.
Okay.
The by-election. Oh, the count. It was the count.
It was the count.
So
yeah, I mean, all hell breaks loose, and she ends up getting hurt after her dad says, "Don't go down there anymore." So that's, but it shows you that Sybil she's not like the rest of her family.
Yeah, she wants to do her own thing.
Exactly right.
Yeah, she's not going to be told what to do. Mary and Matthew then confess their love for each other all of a sudden.
Yeah,
it's like, let's do this. But Mary feels that she's not going to accept this proposal without telling him what's going on, right?
Exactly.
Her scandalous secrets and what have you.
Their relationship over the course of the series kind of, ebbs and flows here and there. I mean, when Matthew first shows up, Mary's like, no, no thanks. Not that she's, not interested in the guy or anything, but I think she's just not interested in her family kind of
pushing her into it.
Yeah, exactly.
Here you go. But then it turns out they do like each other, and so
that kind of reaches a point in episode 6. And as we move on to the final episode of Downton Abbey season 1, and a lot happens in this one. So we start off with we learn about the assassination of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria, which I pointed that out. I said, see, they're talking about the Archduke getting assassinated. You know what that means?
And I did not know what that meant.
No idea what that is.
That shows my history prowess.
Right. Okay, so anyway, that was sort of one of the catalysts, if you look in the history book. One of the catalysts of World War I was the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria. So they hear about this news. We also hear that Lady Grantham, Cora, is pregnant.
Yes, and that's a big shock to everybody. And it's a good thing it makes things easier if it's a boy for them.
And that's what they're all talking about.
They're all hoping
if this is a male, well, then we have our heir.
Yeah.
And so Matthew, I think, gets not necessarily nervous, but then again, he's never been thrilled with the whole thing anyway. So he's kind of thinking, okay, well, maybe it is a boy and we could go back to normal life. And then Mary is in London at this point because they had gone up for Sybil's ball, which we'll talk about a little bit later. She meets with Evelyn Napier, and he is the one that reveals to her that it was Edith who started rumors about her and Mr. Pamuk.
Yeah, and that infuriates Mary. She's not happy.
No kidding. And so, which is a huge shock to her, right? Yeah. Because, I mean, it's her sister. She never would have thought she's
going to rat her out. Yeah,
would spread that kind of a rumor, even though it is true. She never thought that it would be somebody in her own family. She thought perhaps it was Evelyn Napier who spread this rumor, because he was there with Mr. Pamuk that night, not in the room with them, but he was in the house that night. So she thought maybe he was the one telling people about this, but it turns out it was her own sister.
Yeah.
We mentioned Matthew and Mary in the last episode. He proposed to her. He's not terribly happy with how she's kind of dragging her feet on making a decision here. And so that's something that comes out throughout the episode. Mary ends up confronting Edith about that letter.
And she's going to get a revenge, basically. That's what she tells her. Right. She's like, you're done.
And there's a character who, at this point, is kind of a minor character. His name is Anthony Strallen.
Yes.
Who, at first, Lord and Lady Grantham wanted Anthony Strallen to be interested in Lady Mary.
Yeah, but she had no interest whatsoever. She had even less interest than she did when Matthew came.
Exactly, and at least Matthew's her age. Right?
Yeah.
Anthony Strallen's
he's an older guy,
probably in his 50s or something. And so Edith is like, well, I'm going to sweep right in and get Anthony Strong. And then he really starts to become interested in her. But as you said, Lady Mary is out for revenge after Edith sent that letter. Anthony Strong, it makes it seem like he was going to propose to Lady Edith.
At this garden party that they're having. And then what does Mary do?
Well, she kind of makes jokes. Yeah. Like she sees Anthony walking in and she's kind of making jokes as if Edith is, kind of laughing behind his back about the fact that he's about to propose. And so he is just like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to get out of here. Yeah. And of course, Edith is very sad because she was not doing that.
And because she's kind of like the one, like you see Sybil, she's got her own thing going on. You see Mary, she's got her thing going on. Right. Edith just exists.
She's the middle child. And
she's just there.
And many times throughout the course of the series, you'll hear people say, poor Edith.
Yeah.
And, you feel bad for her. But then again, she does do things like send this letter to Turkey and all this kind of stuff.
She has done some things that are questionable.
Nobody's really innocent here if you really do a deep dive. But you do feel bad a lot of times for Edith because, poor Edith.
So you get to the part where, Cora's pregnant. We know that. And O'Brien thinks that Cora wants to replace her.
Right.
So, as her maid. What's it called? Maid?
Lady's maid.
Lady's maid, yeah.
And
it turns out Cora doesn't want to replace her.
Now, this is something we should mention. So Mr. Bates, who we mentioned in episode 1, his arrival kind of shakes everything up. And O'Brien and Thomas are constantly throughout the series trying to get rid of Mr. Bates because they're awful. Yeah. That's, it's just as simple as that, I think. And so they try to pin a robbery on Mr. Bates. And
it's saying that he's stealing the cigar box, or was it that one? Or
it was that first, but that kind of is snuffed out, so to speak, that he was stealing the snuff box, no pun intended, but the wine. So he kind of solves the snuff box issue, but the wine, he actually catches Thomas stealing wine, but then
he doesn't say anything.
He doesn't say anything. Thomas turns around and pins it on Mr. Bates. We find out a little bit about Mr. Bates' background, that he's been in prison for theft before. We ultimately learn that he was actually taking the fall for his wife. But, we hear about his background and everything. And so they're trying to pin the robbery on him. O'Brien and Thomas are really not making any friends.
No.
They're not making anybody happy. There's talk of replacing the two. They're just making trouble the whole time. And so, yes, O'Brien overhears conversations about finding a new lady's maid. It turns out it's actually the Dowager Countess who is looking for a new maid, and she mentions it. I think my maid is leaving, and she's so like, what am I going to possibly do? This is such a tough time for me. My lady's maid is quitting on me. So they're trying to replace her ladies. O'Brien overhears all this and thinks, well, they're replacing me.
It's going to be me,
Right, and so she does...
This is
something
a terrible
so
thing.
Despicable.
Yeah. So Cora's in the bath and she drops her soap out of the bath. And what does O'Brien do? She picks up half of it, slides the other piece underneath the tub. Yeah. Lady Cora gets out of the tub, slips and falls, miscarries. Yeah. So, I mean, it's just terrible. And it's later revealed that it's a boy, too. So, we know that it was going to be, but...
He would have been the heir.
It's never going to be.
To Downton. But, it was not to be because of O'Brien. And then, at the end...
She feels bad about it.
She feels bad at first.
Afterwards, because she walks into the other room. You see her walk in the other room. She's like, what am I doing? What am I doing? And then, boom.
She kind of has the moment. Exactly. Like, she has the moment where she looks at herself in the mirror and says, like, this isn't me. You're an awful person, but you can't do this. And then we hear her fall in the background. And then she runs into the Dowager Countess at the garden party. Yeah. And she comes up to her and says, oh, by the way, I'm looking for a new lady's maid. Can you, give me some recommendations or whatever? What do you think of this person? And she has
the look on her face. She knows she screwed up.
She knows she done messed up.
So Mary's prepared to marry Matthew now, but he doubts her motives, like what she wants to do, and and intends to leave. Right,
because when they found out it was a boy, and one of the things that Matthew thinks Lady Mary is waiting for is the reveal of whether or not it was going to be a boy.
But in fact, it's more so about the Pamuk situation.
Yes, she is hesitant because she knows she has this weight on her shoulders.
Yeah, and
she has this story
that it's all to do with this kid.
He thinks that she's just waiting to find out if he's going to be the next heir or not. And it turns out that's not it at all.
No.
But she has an aunt, Lady Rosamond, who is telling her, wait, because, you want to find out if this guy is going to be an heir. You don't want to just marry a lawyer.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's what he thinks this whole thing is coming down to. It turns out she's just got a secret. And that's why, but things kind of, they kind of go their separate ways at the end because...
They get this letter.
Well, no, because... just because, they both are thinking different things.
Yeah, they're going different directions.
They have a clash and kind of call off their engagement.
And then the telegram. That's the end of the episode.
Right. That's the reveal.
The big reveal that World War I has begun. Yeah. And that's the season in a nutshell. Whew. That's a lot.
A lot happens in season 1 of Downton Abbey. And now that we've kind of covered the plot and we've mentioned a lot of the characters because they all kind of pop up here and there throughout the course of the season, let's kind of go through each of the characters and give them their due. Something we really didn't do in episode 1. So I want to mention these characters and the actors who play them. So let's start with kind of the head, right, the very top of the whole thing. Robert Crawley, the Earl of Grantham, and Cora Crawley, the Countess of Grantham. They're played by Hugh Bonneville and Elizabeth McGovern. What do you think of
likable people?
Absolutely.
They're both, they seem like they treat their servants really well.
Right.
And there doesn't seem to be any scandal with them like there is with the other people, right? They just seem like nice, rich people. I mean, they have a lot of money and that's the way it was, I guess, back then when they have these servants and some people probably didn't treat their servants very well.
I would imagine that's probably
and these
the
people
case.
Seem to be the kind of people that are just decent.
And you see it with the Earl of Grantham. You see it when Mrs. Patmore starts to have trouble with her eyes and everything. And so he sends her off to see a specialist and make sure she's taken care of and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, he really does seem to care. Yeah. He's one of my favorite characters, I have to say, Lord Grantham. He's a really fantastic character and kind of is the glue that holds the whole thing together as far as I'm concerned.
So Lady Mary, Lady Edith, and Lady Sybil, the three sisters. Michelle Dockery is Mary. Laura Carmichael is Edith. And Jessica Brown Finley.
Yes.
Our favorite. That's right. She's my favorite. She's Lady Sybil. And again, we talked a little bit about it. Lady Mary's scandalous. We know that. Right. Edith exists. Lady Sybil is into politics. Right. Three very different parts of life, right?
Exactly.
They're very different.
I think Lady Sybil is probably the most likable of the three because she is trying to do her own thing.
And she's trying to help Gwen.
And she's trying to
get
help
her job.
Gwen.
Yeah.
And Lady Mary is, scheming and, just not very nice to other people at some times. Edith, you feel bad for her. On the other hand, she's does do
sending letters to rat out her
spreading
sister.
rumors and all this. Although, like we said, not a rumor. It's in fact true. But so there's unlikable qualities about Lady Mary and Lady Edith. I think we want them to win in the end. They're not awful, horrible people like some of the characters, which we'll get to. But Lady Sybil, I think, is the most likable of the three.
I agree. And your favorite character?
Right.
Violet Crawley, the Dowager Countess of Grantham.
Yeah, played by the iconic Maggie Smith. This character is the best.
She's funny, yeah.
She's the GOAT.
I can see what you said when you said she's your favorite because just some of the things, just her mannerisms alone and the way she... just the stuff that she does, it's just you can't help but giggle or laugh because it's not customary,
Right. That character is written really well, but it is performed exceptionally well.
Yeah, she does a great job.
Hilarious, very, very funny. When some of these characters are trying to push forward and be more progressive, the daughters, are trying to move into this new era and all this kind of stuff. She is the one conservative voice in the back saying, no.
No way. This is the way it's going to go. Well, exactly. You see that Rose Party, right? That's going back, but she realizes that she should probably give the best because she wins the Rose at the I forget what it's called,
there's a competition for best flowers in the village or whatever.
She wins every year, hands down. So this year she turned it over and
she's starting to come around. Maybe loosen up a little bit, but she still is that one voice. And then she hears about Lady Mary and her escapades with Mr. Pamuk and everything, and she at first is appalled, as a grandmother would likely be. But then comes around. And, it's like, well, it's still my granddaughter.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, she does have a little bit of a change, and she's here for the rest of season 6.
She's in for the long haul.
Hilarious the whole time.
Matthew and Isabel Crowley, played by Dan Stevens and Penelope Wilton.
Right.
Matthew, of course, we've discussed him at length. Isabel, we didn't really talk about much. She plays a role as the nurse.
In episode 2, she kind of has her biggest plot point, but she's here and there. She's asserting herself throughout the course of the season. What do you think of these two?
Likable again. I mean, Matthew doesn't see, again, like we talk about the how terrible some of these people are. And again, these two don't. She obviously wants to help with the doctor and coming up with new techniques to save people's lives. And Matthew's just there, and he's just trying to figure out what the hell's going on. Right?
Exactly.
I mean, so there's
trying
nothing.
To adjust to his surroundings.
There's nothing wrong with them.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier, why can't he just say, fine, I'll take all the money and everything?
Yeah.
Like, does it ever infuriate you at some points that he's trying to hang on so desperately to his other life, or no?
Yeah, it kind of does, because it's like, well, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you take all that money and have these servants? And I guess, everybody's different, but absolutely. At the same time, he take the money, man. Come on.
You're living in a castle. Come on. Okay, so let's move on. So that's kind of the family. Right? Those are the wealthy folks. Let's move on now to the basement, to the servants, and start with Carson and Mrs. Hughes, played by Jim Carter and Phyllis Logan. Yeah,
so at the start, I didn't really... They seemed like they were pretty hard-ass, right? Like, they weren't no nonsense. They weren't going to take any... Right? Yeah, they weren't going to take any crap from anybody. But as the season progresses, they become more likable. Mrs. Hughes with Mr. Bates with that leg thing that he had, and she seems caring. And Mr. Carson, there's things like you find out that he was a stage performer at one point, and he's all ashamed and everything. And turns out nobody cares. But then he becomes more likable as well, and you just see their characters. Get better, I guess, so to say.
He's a guy, both of them really take their job seriously.
Yeah.
And so, yes, at first, your first impression of them is he is a drill sergeant. He is, everything has to be perfect at Downton Abbey and all this kind of stuff. But then, yes, you see a softer side to these people, even though they're still in charge and they're still, making sure everybody's doing their job. You do see a softer side of them, and things would just not work.
No, it would be chaos without those two. Yeah.
Yes, exactly right. Your favorite characters, Thomas Barrow and Sarah O'Brien, played by Robert James Collier and Siobhan Finneran.
Yeah, two of the absolute worst characters, worst people that you could come across.
Are they among the most evil people in television history?
I don't know about that. I don't know if I go that far, but they're pretty bad. I mean,
she did cause a miscarriage.
You're right. That's true. And they're just terrible people. They're always scheming, always trying to get somebody in trouble, always trying to do what's best for them. And it's terrible.
They have to be here.
Yeah.
To make it an interesting story.
Well, that's it. Without them,
yes, it would not be nearly as interesting, because they are constantly scheming and constantly doing these horrible things. Thomas is picking on William, who will mention it in a minute, and just saying the worst things to him.
And he asks Daisy to go to the carnival. Right. When he's gay, he has no interest in going to Daisy,
knowing that William has a crush on Daisy and wants to
that just shows you what kind of person that he is.
Yeah, truly awful people. Let's talk about the better people who work down there. Anna Smith and John Bates, played by Joanne Froggatt and Brendan Coyle.
Yeah, likable characters again. Mr. Bates is comes in with the limp, and everybody's kind of at the start they didn't know what to think. They thought he wasn't going to work, but he's doing his job, and he's doing it well. And he's trying as hard as he can, and Anne is right there by his side. They have a love interest.
Sure.
She tells him that she loves him.
Yep.
I don't know how far that goes, if it continues, because I haven't seen further. I'm assuming it probably will. But again, two likable characters that... That's all I can really say.
Mr. Bates, I mean, I mentioned in our first episode, when he comes in episode 1, he kind of shakes everything up, right? It's the classic, almost cliche trope of a first episode of a series, right? Like the new character comes in and everybody's different. And he really cements his place in there, even though we learn about his past, and there's times where it looks like he might be leaving and all this kind of stuff.
But at the end of the day, he's not going anywhere.
He's safe. Yeah. People there really seem to like him. He's a very stoic guy, even in the line of fire from people like Thomas and O'Brien, who are constantly trying to get rid of him. He holds his ground firm, and he has Anna on his side, who really wants him to stay as well, and will always stand up for him. So yeah, very, very likable characters. They do continue to play a big part as the story goes along. So let's just talk about a few of them here. Mrs. Patmore, Daisy Robinson, and William Mason. We touched on William just a moment ago. Leslie Nichol plays Mrs. Patmore. Sophie McShira plays Daisy Robinson, and Thomas Howes plays William Mason.
Yeah, three kind of minor characters. Right. I mean, you see them, they're around, but they don't really have big roles. Right. Daisy's naive. She's kind of dumb, you know.
Yeah,
and you hate to say it because she's trying. She's trying her best.
She has Mrs. Patmore yelling at her all the time.
Like everything she does, is Mrs. Patmore is just on her.
Yeah,
so.
And they always talk like, oh, Mrs. Patmore is really going hard on that poor girl, and and she does. And Mrs. Patmore is a very funny character as well. We find out. I think I mentioned it when we were talking about the Earl of Grantham. She has eye troubles, and that's one of the reasons why she is so hard on Daisy, is because she can't see, and
she wants everything to be perfect.
She wants everything to be perfect, and things are being messed up. And who do I blame? Daisy.
Let's blame Daisy.
And then William is just
William likes Daisy. Yes. I mean, he's there. His mother ends up dying,
the second footman,
and they send him away.
Yeah.
So I mean,
he's the second footman behind Thomas, and he's taking his job seriously and everything, and everybody just kind of, or well, not everybody, but like Thomas and O'Brien are looking down on him, and everybody just kind of likes him because he's just a nice young guy. Yeah. But then these two are bullying him constantly, and yes, we do find out the sad news that his mother is ill. His mother actually tells Isabel, who works at the hospital, as we mentioned, that she does not want William to know that she is ill. Yeah. But it's actually Lady Mary, in one of the few moments in this season where she actually does something nice for somebody. She has some
compassion,
Yeah, where she actually has some compassion. She says to William, hey, why don't you just take some time off? Go see your mother. Just, go see your mother. Just take a few days. I'll get it all sorted out. and then we do find out that she passes away. But, an incidental character for now. Yeah. But yes. And then Tom Branson.
Yes. I briefly, I don't know anything about this guy. We know that he's the chauffeur.
He's the chauffeur.
He doesn't even really have that many lines. Like, he doesn't talk too much.
Not yet. And so what do we know about him? He's very political. He's a socialist. He wants Ireland to be independent from the UK, which I don't believe at this point in history had happened yet. Well, I guess that's why he's talking about it. Played by Alan Leach, by the way. And he's everybody kind of blames him for Sybil being political, and when Sybil gets into trouble at the count, when she goes to that political rally and she gets injured, the first thing Lord Grantham says is, "Well, it's Branson."
Yeah, it's
even though, remember when they drove up to that political rally, she kind of jumped out of the car.
Yeah,
he said, "No, we're going back."
Yeah.
He doesn't want to lose his job, even though he is political. But he is a very interesting character, and he pops up a lot more as the season goes along, or as the series goes along, but I will not tell you how.
All right. Is it woke?
Is it woke?
Is it woke?
This is something we always talk about when we cover movies. Mm-hmm. And so, we might as well talk about it here, because this does take place in a very interesting time, more than 100 years ago, April of 1912 to May of 1916. Very different time 100 years ago than it is now. And what's kind of interesting is, because the show is made in the modern era, they kind of poke fun at all of the sort of archaic opinions that pop up throughout the series. Somebody will make a reference to women not being able to vote or whatever, and then it's almost played as a joke.
They'll kind of laugh about it or something.
Well, the way it's edited too, it's like they make it a joke for us watching it, even though they're serious about it, because that's the time that they're living in, and of course women can't have the right to vote or what. But then it's the way it's edited so brilliantly, it plays as a joke for us. Like a wink, wink, things are different nowadays, sort of thing. And so that happens. Sybil, as we've mentioned, she's very political and really wants the whole suffragette movement to really take off. She wants women to get the right to vote and all that stuff. So she certainly, if we're talking about is it woke, she's a character that we could point to and say, yes, it is. And the way she helps Gwen and everything.
And what about the season for the daughter when they kind of throw the ball and say, like, what does that mean? Like, I don't really...
Yeah, I think it's about trying to find their daughter a potential suiter, and they literally go up to London, and they invite all their friends, all the other earls and dukes and whatever, and it's her season.
It's her season.
And they're throwing a ball and all this kind of stuff. And that's, I don't know, is that how it's done these days?
I
don't think that's how it is. You know what, Brandon? I'm starting to get a little thirsty.
Oh, ring that bell. Mm-hmm. Oh, look at that. Beautiful.
Thank you.
You're welcome, my lord.
All right.
On to your reaction.
Excellent service. So yeah, my reaction to this, after we watched episode 1, I was intrigued as to what was going on. I mean, I wanted to learn more.
Right.
The storylines that are involved, they've got just enough to them that they make you want more. They don't tell you a whole lot. So it's like you're constantly asking what's going to happen next.
The writing is incredible.
And the writing's great. Yeah, the writing's awesome. The acting's awesome. Yeah. And they lay out what's going on without revealing too much, I think. And it sucks you in because you grow to like or dislike the characters. Like we've said, Thomas and O'Brien and Lady Grantham and Lord Grantham and how we like them. And you find out what happens. You want to find out what's happening next. And by the end of season 1, I was hooked on it. Yeah. I got to say, I do see myself continuing watching this series.
Okay, because that was going to be my next question. Because this is probably what everybody who's watching wants to know.
Yeah.
Can we just put the camera on him just for a moment? Look at the camera.
I'm looking at the camera.
This guy.
I do want to watch another season of Downton Abbey and continue watching it and watch the rest of it.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Well, that's, I would say that is a win for me.
Yeah, we're going to save that for another episode, though.
Absolutely. Yeah, if we do if Brandon does end up watching the remainder of the series, we will revisit it at some point, and we will, see if his opinions have changed again and everything. Maybe even just a short episode, but we may revisit it again if Brandon watches the rest of the series. So how has your opinion changed, or has it, since episode 1, since your first impression?
Well, no, I liked it. I mean, my first impression was it was an interesting show. Yeah. I didn't know right away that I would get into it as much as I did, but yeah, no, absolutely, my opinion has changed. And you were right when you said I would be the last person that would ever watch this show on my own. Right. But I'm glad that you introduced me to it.
Right. Because it does move slow.
Yeah.
And
there's no action.
There's no action whatsoever.
But the story is the one. It's what keeps you.
It's exactly right. It really hooks you in. So here's a big question: who interests you more, the Crawley family, who own and run Downton Abbey, or the servants?
That's a good question. I think both. I mean, they're both interesting in their own means. Like, you've got the Crowley family trying to figure out who's going to be the heir. You've got all the chaos going on downstairs with all the intertwining storylines. I don't really have
you really can't pick a favorite, eh?
No.
Yeah, it'd be difficult for me as well. It's difficult because... Yeah, when you look at the whole story arc, and we broke down, every episode, what happens, all the big plot points and everything. I mean, both sides are there in almost equal measure, and they're both very interesting. So, it is kind of tough to pick a side.
A favorite almost, or a side,
I think I probably like the people, like the servants more than I like the Crawley family.
They're more, because the Crawleys are a little bit pretentious, right? And the servants are just trying to make a living.
Yes, exactly. Right, you could relate to them more, certainly. But then again, the storylines of the wealthy family are certainly very, very interesting. So it is hard to choose. But I just thought I'd throw that out there. And you mentioned in the last episode that you don't really like watching British television.
Yeah, I wasn't a big fan.
Right.
I mean, not that I've watched a lot, but what I've seen, I didn't enjoy.
It just doesn't really appeal to you. It just
doesn't. No, it's dry. It's But now that I've seen this, my opinion has changed. Yeah, I might be more inclined to watch some more British television.
Okay. Yeah. Now, because I have watched a few different British series in the past. Usually, what I watch is like police procedural type shows, like Luther or Broadchurch.
Yeah, I've heard of those, and I've heard they're excellent.
They're fantastic. Now, this is a historical drama. It's almost like a soap opera in a lot of ways. This doesn't seem to me to be right up your alley, which is kind of why I wanted to show you this show. And you did end up liking it, which is
100%
great.
right.
But would you consider watching a show that you might be more interested? Because you've watched, other crime shows and procedurals and things like that. Would you like to watch one of those shows now that you've seen this show and enjoyed it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, I've heard good things about Luther. I've heard,
great.
I've never seen that. I know of it, but I'd watch.
Okay.
Yeah. And let's preview next week's episode. Now, that was a lot. That was a lot.
And so that's kind of our, just in closing, that's our wrap up to season 1 of Downton Abbey. We have established Brandon will return to the show, or is hoping to at some point. And if we do complete the rest of that series, we will perhaps touch on it again. But we're going to get back into movies now for a few episodes here. And there's a big reason why you are choosing your next movie.
Yeah, so we're going to do Boys in the Hood. I've seen it.
Right.
It was a long time ago when I've seen it, but I've watched it quite a bit. Mm-hmm. Eryk has not seen it, and the reason that we chose it is because John Singleton, the writer and director of the movie,
passed away recently.
Yeah. He had a stroke, and then he was in a coma, and then his family ultimately decided to pull the plug.
Yeah.
So to honor him, we're going to watch Boys in the Hood. That'll be our next episode.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. So there you go. This has been Watch This with Eryk and Brandon. I want to thank Joe and Lucas and Shelby, especially Joe, for bringing us the water.
Yes.
Thank you.
Lovely job.
We will see you next week.
See you next time.